Happy wife, happy life, keep her in a good mood, keep her happy. So what we do is we just basically hand the keys to the relationship over to the woman and just try to figure out how do we make her happy. We just hand that over to the woman. And you know what? Women have been consistently telling me they don't want that. They don't want that. It's the kiss of death of you letting the woman set the emotional tone. And one thing that I've often said, if you leave a woman in charge of the relationship, she'll drive it off a fucking cliff. Right? They don't want to be in charge. Let's just dive in with setting the tone and leading. And this, I think, is one of the most, well, all four of these things we're going to talk about are challenging for nice guys. But this is one because, Vince, as you've indicated, we men tend to really misunderstand. So when I talk about setting the tone and taking the lead, and I began talking about this primarily with single guys, but it is also 100% relevant in relationship because somebody's got to lead, right? Somebody's got to drive the car. Somebody's going to decide what we're going to have for dinner. Somebody's got to, have the remote for the TV in their hand and make a choice, right? Somebody's going to lead and somebody's going to set the tone. So who is it going to be and how conscious is that process going to be? So when I talk to men about setting the tone and leading, what most men, most nice guys especially, they'll come back with, okay, so Dr. Glover, I know you say take control, right? And I go, no, I never say take control. I do not say take the control. The only thing you've got control over is what you choose to do. You don't have control over anybody else. Don't try to control anybody else. It's a fool's errand. I don't even know how to do it. But setting the tone and taking the lead is not about being controlling. And the reason I make this distinction is because I don't know about you. I'm going to do another little poll here in the chat box. How many of you consciously at some point in your life made a decision to try to either be different from your father or all the other bad men you heard women complain about? Maybe it was your mother, maybe it was girls in junior high, maybe it's women you've dated. If you made a decision to put a one in the chat box, if you decide to try to be different from your father, all the bad men out there, just look at the one scrolling there. So probably the universal thing that we think we can't do is be controlling. Don't be a controlling asshole, right? We've heard women complain about that. For many of us with our mothers. My mother told me as a child she was raising me and my brother to be different from our father. Okay, so when I'm talking about setting the tone and leading, all right, it's just showing up with a plan. It's setting the emotional tone of the relationship. And it begins with you having a plan for your life. You've got to be clear in your own direction. What does your ideal life look like? Several of you have done TPI weekend workshops with me. And you know I typically do a guided imagery of what does your ideal life look like. And you know what? That's a challenging imagery for most nice guys to do, right? We don't think we have the right to set about and create our ideal life. So what happens? We get into a relationship. We have no direction. We have no clarity. And so what becomes our major priority in relationship? Probably maintaining the possibility of availability, right? Happy wife, happy life, keep her in a good mood, keep her happy. She'll want to have sex, right? So that's really what happens. So what we do is we just basically hand the keys to the relationship over to the woman and just try to figure out how do we make her happy? How do we keep her in a good mood? How do we keep her sexually available? Man, I see a lot of heads nodding. We've all done that. We just hand that over to the woman. And you know what? Women have been consistently telling me they don't want that. They don't want that. When I was dating, and after I dated a woman maybe three, four, half a dozen times, if it looked like we were going to keep seeing each other, I'd have a little talk with her. And I would say, hey, it looks like we're going to keep seeing each other. And I said, here's what you can expect from me moving forward. I said, I will be conscious. I'll pay attention to you, to me, to us, what's going on. I will tell the truth. Everything I tell you will be the whole truth. You won't ever find out I left anything out, bended the truth, told a lie. I'll be transparent. You'll know what I think, what I feel, what I want, what I expect of you. And I said, I will set the tone and take the lead. I'll show up with a plan. Every woman I told that to just looked at me and said, I've never had a man tell me anything like that before. And then the good ones all said, what do you expect from me? And I'd say, I've got my life pretty well covered. I got good friends. I got a job. I got a full cake of a life. I said, treat me well, make my world beautiful. And then they would all kind of look up the corner of their eyes like, yeah, I've got some ideas for treating him well and making his world beautiful. But they're not going to just show up and know to do that if we don't set that tone and set that lead. So, and again, and it begins with us knowing where we're going. And again, it can be as simple as like, on a first or second date, tell the woman, hey, I got an idea. Meet me here. We're going to go do this. For example, when I was, dating, if I dated a woman, got past the first copy date or two, I started immediately putting them into situations to test their nature. I would set the tone for every date, right? I would go on a cheap, inexpensive date. I'd make them ride public transportation and go to a baseball game with me where I bought tickets from a scalper on a bicycle out in front of the stadium. If they last got through some of that stuff, I'd take them to hear live music. If they got through that, I'd take them camping. You want to find out a woman's nature? Take her camping where there's no showers, no hot water, maybe a toilet, maybe not, right? Put them in situations where you find but that requires leadership on your part. And I remember I taught an evening class on dating at a local community college. And afterwards, a bunch of us guys went to a local restaurant, a Ruth's Chris that I used to hang out in. And the waitress, Jessica, came by to take our order. And I said, Jessica, I want to ask you a question. I said, how do you like it when the guys you're dating leaves all the decisions up to you? Where you're going to go, what you're going to eat, what you're going to do tonight? Without even like, stopping, from her order pad, she just looked up and said, I hate it. I just looked at all the guys. I said, listen to that. The women hate it when we do that. What do you want to do tonight, dear? Where do you want to go? They want us to show up and get the ball rolling. So it doesn't matter if you're a single guy or a man in a relationship. You've got to set the tone and lead it. And the thing I've been saying for quite some time is a woman can't follow where a man doesn't lead. Right? Again, we just think, well, she's going to know what we like. She's going to know what we want. She's going to show up in ways that, that I'm going to be happy with. She's going to XYZ fill in the blank. But how will she know if we don't set the tone and lead and just let her know? Now, more than just you having a plan for the dates, like where we're going to go, what movie we're going to watch. And again, none of this is about being controlling. It's just showing up with a plan. It's just getting the ball rolling. I mean, there's flexibility in there. Say, hey, I was thinking about let's go do this. And she said, well, can we do it Wednesday instead of Tuesday? Yeah, work around it. If you say, hey, let's go get some Chinese. And she said, well, I was really wanting some Italian. Yeah, but you got the ball rolling, right? It's not that you were controlling or trying to get your own way. Now, a bigger test that I think we guys have a harder time really grasping is I believe it's our job to set the emotional tone of the relationship. So often we nice guys kind of walk on eggshells, kind of dance around, the fear we have of a woman having a reaction to something. We go along to get along. We avoid doing things that we think might get a reaction. We avoid the conflict. We don't want to piss her off, right? We want to maintain that possibility of availability, keep her in a good mood. But that's a suicide path. It's the kiss of death of you letting the woman set the emotional tone. And one thing that I've often said, if you leave a woman in charge of the relationship, she'll drive it off a fucking cliff, right? They don't want to be in charge. When I tell a woman, if I'm on an airplane talking to somebody, a woman says, what do you do? And I say, well, I work with men around relationships. Oh, what do you teach them? And I tell the women what I'm teaching you guys. And the women say, can I come wait out in the parking lot after your workshops and meet these guys? Can you put up a website? Where can I find these guys? Women like this stuff. When I was doing marriage therapy, and I would go into these things beginning with a guy with his wife or girlfriend in my office, I'd talk about what we're talking about on this webinar, beginning with setting the tone and leading. And I'd only get a couple minutes into this. The woman would look at her husband and go, I like this guy. He understands women. And the guy's just befuddled because he's been trying to figure out and make her happy. And I just say, set the tone and lead. They want that. My second wife, who was just could be hell on wheels, she would often tell me, I'm just a little girl making noise. And when you like get all scared and try to make me happy and fix everything, she goes, that doesn't make me feel safe. That doesn't make me feel loved. The women want the security of knowing we're not just going to react and try to fix and problem solve every time they have a mood or they're upset or they're angry or they're whatever, right? They want us setting that tone. So for single guys, let me real quick. If you are a single guy, raise your digital hand. Let me see single guys for a minute. And I may ask you to do this more than once on this call. Sid's hand went up. Sid's the only single guy on the call. All right, Coach Kevin, Alan. Good to see you, Alan. All right. And some of you did the thumbs up thing. That's fine. Okay. Hands down. If you raised your hand, hands down. Okay. So I've been saying for a while now that I think it takes up to 3 years of conscious dating to really get to know a woman. 3 years. Every relationship I've ever been in that lasted that long, at about 3 years, the woman either did something, told me something, said something that I did not fucking see coming. I mean, I thought I might know her pretty well, but here all of a sudden, whoa, where did that come? So I think the first 3 years of dating is a test. And the test is, what is her nature and how does she fit into my great life? What is her nature and how does she fit into my great life? Most men ask the wrong questions. They go, why is she doing that? How can I get her to quit doing that? How can I get her to do more of that? How come? How come? Why? Yeah, yeah. No, the only question that's relevant is, what does this behavior tell me about her nature and how does that fit into my great life, right? You've got a great life going on, right? A great cake of a life. You're living your ideal life. You know where you're going, right? You're inviting her into that great life. That's why you have to keep setting the tone and lead. You have to lead and see if she follows. So everything you do is a test of her nature. And most of you have heard me say, go as slowly as possible to find out as quickly as possible what her nature is. So lead and see if she follows, invite her into your great life, watch for the red and yellow flags, and you're going to hear me say something several times on this webinar today. Be willing to get to rejection quickly. That doesn't matter if it's a first date or you're 10 years into a marriage. Be willing to get to rejection quickly because as long as you're seeking a woman's approval, you're toast and she will not feel loved by you, right? She's not going to be turned on by you. Women want a strong man who knows where he's going. Let me just throw out this quote for a second, and probably I'll bring it up again. I shared this with Chris Williamson a year or two ago, and he just put it out viral. He shared this quote with Alex Hormozy, with Mark Manson, with several people. I shared it on a podcast just the other day. When I share it with women coaches, they all go, ah. But what I say is that the feminine is highly attracted to a man who's comfortable in his own skin, knows where he's going, and looks like he's having a good time getting there. Right? That's what women are attracted to, and that's what women are following. Now, that's a man who's setting the tone for his life and can set the tone from a relationship. Okay, so if you're in a relationship, uh, let's raise your hand. Well, I'm going to assume that if you didn't raise your hand for single, I'm going to assume maybe you're in a relationship. We've got to break out of that, maintaining the possibility of availability, trying to keep her happy, happy wife, happy life kind of thing. We need to be applying the second date rule throughout the lifespan of a relationship. And the second date rule is simply this. If your partner had done X, Y, or Z behavior, whatever it might be, calling you a name, being completely unavailable, being cold, whatever it might be, flirting with another man, lying to you. If she'd done it on a second date, would you have asked her out on a third date? Now, here's the thing. There's shit we wouldn't tolerate from a woman on a second date, but we're tolerating it from her in a long-term relationship. That's back-ass words. That's wrong. Your long-term relationships, the people you're with, the person you're with, they should be getting better over time, not worse. And the reason why they get worse is we tolerate things we shouldn't tolerate. We tolerate things we would not have tolerated on a second date. So we'll come back to second date rule because it is that important. So we have to set the tone in our long-term intimate relationships. We do this by doing the things we've been avoiding out of fear of getting a reaction or rocking the boat. Now, I'm as guilty as this as anyone. You guys have all heard stories about my amazing, beautiful, uh, crazy Latina jealous wife, right? And you know what? I'm guilty of this because, things she would get, it seemed like every restaurant or coffee shop we ever went in, she said, "Oh, that woman's being a puta with you." Now, from then on out, I can't go to that restaurant or coffee shop because she says there's a puta in there. Or I go to the gym. That puta was flirting with you. So, okay, I can't go to the gym anymore. And you know what? I fell into that trap. I let her set the tone because I didn't want to deal with her reactions. And you know what? The only reason why we're coming up on our ninth anniversary, ninth wedding anniversary in November. And the only reason we've made it 9 years is I had to reverse that nice guy behavior. And I had to start doing the very things that I thought might get me a negative reaction. So just like this week, Monday, Lupita and I are going for a walk with the dog. I said, "You going to the gym this morning?" She goes, "Yeah." I want to come and do a leg workout. It's like her gym, right? And she goes, "Yeah, sure." So went, and then that night she goes, "I'm really mad at you." She didn't say it quite like that, but she said, "You were looking at my friend's butt, and she came over and like bent over and her butt right in your face while you were on that machine." And I just looked at my wife and go, "You know how much I love you. Thanks for letting me come and work out at your gym." And then she goes, then she was okay. She just got over it. And then Wednesday, we're out walking the dog. I said, "Hey, you going to the gym this morning?" She said, "Yeah, of course." I said, "Hey, I want to come and do a chest workout." She goes, "Yeah." I had to leave a little earlier than her. I got home, said, "Hey, I'm back home." And she sent me a message, said, "Thanks for coming to the gym with me." Right? Now, the reason why that emotional tone shifted is I quit avoiding the things I thought might get a negative reaction and just did them anyway. Right? Just leaned into the things that might get a negative reaction. And I did it enough that we're either going to get to rejection quickly. It's either going to blow this fucker up and we're going to move on, or she's going to learn to adapt to my leadership and learn to regulate her emotional reactions. She's going to work on her shit, and she does. And so other thing I'll throw about setting the tone and leading, we're not going to get a perfect woman, but we better not stay with a woman who's not willing to take accountability for her actions and work on herself. That's crucial. That's key. So do the things that you've been avoiding to upset her. Take off the handcuffs that you put on your wrist and her wrist and gave her the key when you got in that relationship. We'll talk about that more in differentiation. Be willing to blow it up. Be willing to get to rejection quickly. Be willing to have difficult conversations. Verbalize your boundaries. We're going to come back to boundaries later on. But as you do have difficult conversations, quit using a lot of words. Just get to the point. "Hey, that doesn't work for me. No, I'm going to do that. You can be unhappy about it, but I'm still going to do it anyway." Like when they tell you, "Well, you shouldn't go hang out with your friends. He's a drunk or he's a jerk." You go, "Hey, you used to like him. I still do. I'm hanging out with him." Just take the action, have difficult conversation, use as few words as possible. Now, I'm going to give you one little hack, especially for you guys in longer term relationships, that I heard from an Indian guru who's since fallen into, eh, apparently his followers, his cult, that he was abusing young children. But he wrote a book for men. And most of the book was pretty lame, but he gave one suggestion in there that I really loved. And that was when your woman's like behaving badly, doing the things like, being crabby, being this, being controlling, whatever. He said, kind of just lean back a little bit, kind of withdraw yourself just slightly. Doesn't mean you have to like leave the room, but quit engaging in what's happening. And he said, just go about your business with no words, but with a smile on your face. Right? Now she's cold. She's angry. She's wanting to fight. She's wanting you to chase her. She's wanting whatever. She's setting that emotional tone. But what if you just go about your business, do what you need to do, not talking much, kind of a conscious silent treatment, but you're happy. You're smiling. You're whistling. You're walking, and your woman's going to start thinking, "What's up? How come he's not fighting with me? How come he's not pissed off? How come he's not pouting? How come?" And you're just happy but quiet. And she's going to come try to figure out what the hell's going on, right? She's going to come to you. And then when she comes to you, you can just say, "No, that doesn't work. If you want to hang out with me, can't do it that way. Here's how you have to do it if you want to hang out with me." But that happy silent treatment, I just thought was gold. And I've used it and it worked. There's so many times that Lupita's like seemed cold or withdrawn or this or that. And I just go about my business. I stay happy. I stay connected. I do my work. I hang with my bros, talk to my guy friends. And then later on she comes, "You're not mad? You're not upset?" "No, I'm in a good mood actually." And she'll want to get in a good mood to match my mood. Okay. Last piece of advice. Don't try to do this alone. You're going to hear us talk throughout this call of building connection with men as the foundation for your relationships. But I'll add to that. I'm a marriage therapist by training. I believe in relationship therapy. I believe in relationship coaching. I believe in having a relationship posse of people who know you and help you. We've got to let people help us. Don't try to do it alone. Finally, whether it's one date, 6 dates, 6 years together, be willing to walk away. Because as we're going to talk about with boundaries, the only power you have to set a boundary is a willingness to remove yourself. Be willing, whether it's remove yourself a little bit or a lot, be willing to walk away.